It's pretty soft. There is a game set. Try again? Sure.
Hello everyone. Hi. Welcome to our public meeting for today. It's great to see everyone here.
We are so glad you've come to join us today. My name's Henry. I'm one of the student leaders here at the EU. We are a Christian group on campus that is united by the Jesus of the Bible.
My name is Rebecca and I work alongside the EU. If you weren't able to join us last week, our guest speaker Glen helped us to answer some questions. Is it good to meet Jesus? Is it safe to meet Jesus? And we also heard, is it necessary to meet Jesus? We heard some great talks, and I really encourage you guys to check out the Sydney Uni EU YouTube channel or podcast if you missed out or if you want to hear some of those talks again.
Today we are going to be continuing in our Meet Jesus talks. And so if you've come along today and been invited by a friend, or you've just seen some of the stuff happening on campus and interested to learn more about Jesus, or you've come here for some other reason, we are so glad that you're here, and we really hope today is a great time for you.
For any Cantonese speakers who might be among us, today we're really glad to have some live translation happening. So if you're interested in this, please take a photo of this slide and follow the instructions from the QR code link. And for any visitors who are among us today, welcome. We hope you got a welcome pack as you walked in. And if not, we'd love for you to have one. So inside you'll find a few resources So you'll find a copy of the Gospel of John, which we really hope that you'll take and read with a friend. And if we missed you earlier, please raise your hand, and we'll have one of the ushers bring you a welcome back.
Also, after our meeting today, if you're free, we are going to have lunch together afterwards for the hour after. I'm pretty sure today's bar me, which is awesome, so come along. We had it last week, it was so good. Come along for the hour after. There'll be more instructions at the end about where to find that. But as we get into our meeting today, we'd love to get everyone to know each other a little bit. So, first, can you please scan the QR code on the screen or go to mentor.com and type in that code. We'll need that in just a bit. But once you've opened that page, turn to the person next to you and ask this question. What does it mean to thrive, and what does it take to thrive? So we give you a minute to ask this questions. What does it mean to thrive, and what does it take to thrive? And we'll come back in a minute. The screen as well. So if you want to fill that out, is that going to work? Oh, now while those are coming up, Beck, what do you associate with thriving?
So I grew a mango plant from seed, and it's sitting on this nice spot outside my window. It's got some nice green leaves, and so when I think of thriving, I think of my mango plant.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think of the word thriving, I think like flourishing and growing and being healthy. Are some of these coming through? We're going to see what you guys thought. It's not working?
Waiting for presenter.
Well, maybe we'll see them at the end. I don't think that's going to work right now. Okay, but we all want to thrive. That was kind of where we were going with that. But Jesus makes the claim that to thrive is to know Him. And that's something that we're going to be looking at shortly.
So our speaker for today is Glen Scrivener. I'd love to welcome up Glen. He's come to us from the UK, where he directs a ministry called Speak Life. And as part of that ministry, he has a podcast, you've got a YouTube channel, and you give talks in a variety of contexts. And Glen, you're also the author of several books. So thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. Could you tell us a bit more about the kind of things we might find on your podcast, on your videos, or other things you're producing, and maybe recommend something for the Christians in this room, as well as those who are still making up their mind about Jesus?
Cool. Shall I use that? Yeah, great. So just find us on your social media of choice. YouTube and podcasts are probably where we sort of spit out most stuff. So a couple of videos a week on our YouTube channel and a couple of podcasts. So if you love Jesus and want to share Jesus, go to YouTube and find Speak Life. And we really try to see all things through the lens of Jesus. That's kind of the strap line for our YouTube channel and for our podcast. And then if you're just looking, there's a resource that we produce called 321. You can go to 321course.com, 321course.com. And it's kind of like a Christianity 101 for a digital age. There's an app, you get in there, and there are like 8 sessions that you can work your way through. You can binge it in a couple of hours, or you can do it in those 8 sessions. There's a chat community, there's a stack of different resources that you can do. So go to 321course.com and get your Christianity 101. Over to me? Oh, brilliant, brilliant. Do you have these? If you are new to the EU, hopefully you received this in your welcome pack. You can dive in and get one of these John's Gospels. If not, you can bring up John's Gospel on your phone, or perhaps you brought a Bible. We're going to look at John chapter 13. And John is one of the early followers of Jesus. He wrote this biography of Jesus in the 1st century AD to point people to Jesus so that they would indeed meet Jesus. And in the passage in John chapter 13 that we're going to read, he will tell us how to thrive. So that's good, isn't it? We all want to know how to thrive, even if we can't define it. Did you have struggle trying to define what thriving is, let alone how to do it? I think Jesus will give us some great help as we go to John 13 from verse 1. It's the night before Jesus dies, and you might imagine that Jesus has other things on his mind than what he ends up doing. It's a very surprising chapter of the Bible. It's on page 76 of these. John chapter 13 from the first verse. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who are in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, that he had come from God and was returning to God, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel round his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." I want to think about that word blessed right there at the end. It's actually a word that means thriving, actually. It's a word that's often translated happy. Is that a word that came up when you thought about thriving? If you're thriving, you're happy, you're blessed, you're going with the grain of reality. If you're the sort of plant that needs sunshine, you're on the windowsill receiving the sunshine. If you're the sort of plant that thrives in the shade, then you're in the shade. But you go with the grain of reality. You are appropriate to the kind of environment that you find yourself in. That's what blessed means. You know the old King James translation of the Bible, 400 years old now? They were happy just translating this verse, "If you do these things, you'll be happy." Don't you want to be happy? Don't you want to live the blessed life? Don't you want to thrive? Well, a big question presents itself when you start to think about thriving. You need to figure out what your environment is. If you're a plant that thrives in sunshine, well, I guess you better get into that sunshine. And if you're a plant that thrives in shade, then you better find shade. If you're going to go with the grain of reality, I guess you need to know which way reality is going. If you want to thrive in a sporting contest, I guess you better learn the rules and know how this particular game is played. If you just come and pick up the ball when you're playing football, soccer, then you'll probably get sent off, right? You're not thriving in that environment. You're not happy, nobody's happy. until you are living appropriate to the environment in which you find yourself. So, to answer the question, how do you thrive, you need to ask the question, what is your environment? What is ultimate reality? And I think there are probably 4 different answers to that question when you try and think of what ultimate reality really is. And we'll get at those 4 different answers by asking this question. What do you think was there in the beginning? In the beginning is a phrase that begins the Bible. It also begins John's Gospel. In Genesis chapter 1, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. In John's Gospel, it says, in the beginning was the Word. Capital W word. Last week, we learned how Jesus is the Word. He was there in the beginning, right? Where does your mind go to when I present you with the phrase, in the beginning? If you were to hit rewind on the video of reality and go all the way back before there were people, before there were planets, before there were protons, what was there in the beginning? I think you can come up with 4 different answers to that question. These are not hard and fast answers. There's a lot of overlap between these 4 answers, but people have been giving these kinds of answers in the history of the world. There's nothing, there's chaos, there's power, and there's love. What do you think was there in the beginning? Nothing, chaos, power, or love? The nothing answer kind of presents itself to us almost instinctively. When somebody says to me, what was there before the universe? I've got a kind of an instinctive answer to that. Well, nothing. Because the universe is everything, right? I have that instinctive answer even though I'm a Christian, right? Even though I know there is something older than the universe. Nevertheless, when somebody says, what was there before the universe? I think we've all got this sort of instinctive kind of atheism, don't we? That before the universe is everything, right? There could be nothing before the universe. But if there's nothing before the universe, then we've got a very miraculous view of reality, actually. I actually think the atheistic view is the most miraculous view of reality, because out of nothing has come everything, for no reason. Where have we come from? Nothing. For what reason? There is no reason, because there's nothing. And from nothing, everything has come. As a Christian, I believe in the virgin birth of the cosmos. As a Christian, I believe in the virgin birth of Jesus, right? But this would be the virgin birth of the cosmos, right? The virgin birth of the cosmos, and without a virgin to work the miracle, right? Nothing in the beginning. But if everything did come from nothing, then really there is no grain to the universe. There's a deep absurdity to this world. We've come from nothing, we're headed nowhere. And actually randomness kind of belongs to the state of this world. Life would be absurd, and what does it mean to thrive? I guess you make it up. It's up to you to make up your own meaning, right? We've all come from nothing, and there's nothing over us to tell us what the grain of the world really is, okay? And so if we come from nothing, then you can make up your own meaning from nothing. Okay? And so to thrive means to live in a world that ultimately doesn't have a rhyme or reason or a grain to it. And so to thrive, well, it could mean anything. It's up to you. Another answer to the question, what was there in the beginning? There was nothing. What about chaos? A lot of different ancient Near Eastern myths, and the Greek myths and the Roman myths, talked about the world coming out of chaos and killing and warfare. Squabbling deities, and maybe a naughty god gets kicked out of a club and starts a thing called planet Earth, or maybe the world is just the body of a dead monster sort of cut in two, and we are living in the remains. But we've come out of chaos and killing and conflict. And there can be a version of that in modern secular society. Where have we come from? Bang. Crash. Selfishness, struggle. And here we are. And again, there's no rhyme nor reason above us, but there is, out of the chaos, a great struggle for survival. What would it mean to thrive if that is ultimate reality? Well, I guess it would mean fight to get on top. Fight to get on top. For a bit. because eventually there'll be someone stronger than you, and then they'll get on top, and then the next person will get on top. But ultimately, there is no real winner. It's chaos. Nothing, chaos. There's a third answer. What was there in the beginning? Power. Now, again, there's a secular version of this, and there's a religious version of this. The secular version of this is, well, overarching this world are iron laws of physics that grind along, and we dance to their tune. But there's a religious version as well. A lot of religious people talk about God simply as power. God is almost synonymous with the idea of a power above us, and our role is simply to dance to his tune. Often when a Westerner thinks of God, often a Westerner will think of a lonely individual who is power. I talked last week about growing up and thinking about God as basically like electricity. God is basically like electricity, I thought. He's just a power. You can harness him for good in your life, and if you get on the wrong side of him, zap. But I tried to dance to the tune of this impersonal power, and that was a slavery, really. Religious people can get caught up in that slavery. But the good news is there is a fourth answer to the question. What was there in the beginning? Not nothing, not chaos, not simply power, but love. John's Gospel begins, in the beginning was the Word. That's Jesus, the Son of God. He was with God in the beginning. And with the Holy Spirit together, the three made this world. And the three are one because they are united in love. The Father has always been loving his Son, Jesus, in the joy of the Holy Spirit. We have come from love. We've been shaped by love. We are intended for love. Love really is the greatest thing according to the Bible. Because the greatest thing, God, is love. Now, if life is about nothing, then you make up your own meaning as you go along. If life is about chaos, then you fight to get on top, and that's how you thrive. If life is about power, then you serve and serve and serve and serve, and you're enslaved to the great power above. And that's the way you thrive, because that's ultimate reality. If God is love, how do you thrive? You receive that love, and you pass it on. That's the blessed life. That's the happy life. That is living with the grain of ultimate reality. Receive a love that is older than the universe. Enjoy that love. And then overflow with that love to others. And that's what this story is all about. Let's go back to verse 1 and I'll show you. Verse 1, it was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. The hour is something that John writes about again and again. Jesus is constantly saying, the hour is coming. There is this moment, this epochal moment, this moment that kind of defines me, that defines all reality. The hour is coming, the hour is coming. And Jesus says, when the hour comes, I will be lifted up. And I'm sure the disciples first thought that Jesus meant, okay, lifted up on a throne, lifted up on a stage, lifted up on a platform. In what sense will Jesus be lifted up? What is his hour? And he keeps saying, when I'm lifted up in my hour, I will display my glory, my bright, shining, divine brilliance. You'll see God at full strength when my hour comes, when I'm lifted up. And again, people must have imagined that Jesus would be lifted up on people's shoulders and some kind of celebration would happen. When is the hour? What is the hour? When is Jesus lifted up? What is his glory? And in chapter 12, Jesus has just told people that his hour and his glory means his death. He's going to be lifted up on a cross. And it's the cross that will reveal his glory. It's his self-giving love that will display the bright, shining brilliance of divine glory. That's a surprising thing to say, isn't it? According to the Bible, you've never seen anything more divine than Jesus lifted up on a cross, arms outstretched to the world, bleeding for his enemies, saying, Father, forgive them. never seen anything more divine than that. This is what God looks like. And when God the Son, Jesus Christ, shows up on planet Earth, he says, the most godly thing I ever do is to be lifted up. It's my hour. When I reveal to the world what God truly is like. What is God truly like? God is love. So here is Jesus, it's the night before he dies, and he knows it. And having loved his own who are in the world, he loved them to the end. Verse 3, let's skip over verse 2. Verse 3, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. I love that word so in verse 4. Jesus knew he's the Son of the Father on the mission from God to love the world. He knew he's from the Father, that he's returning to the Father, that he's the son of the emperor. He's the heir of the cosmos. Therefore, he stoops and serves and humiliates himself and cleanses people. This is the way in which he reveals the divine glory. It's so interesting that right at the end of John chapter 12 and right at the beginning of John chapter 14, Jesus says, if you see me, you see the Father. You can check it out for yourself. It's John 12, verse 45, if you're taking notes, and John 14, verse 9. Right before this event and right after this event, Jesus says, if you see me, you know what God's like. So with all eyes on Jesus, what does he do? It's very surprising. He leaves the place of honor at the meal, and he takes off his robe, which is the clothing of a king. He took off his outer clothing, that's literally his robe, and he wrapped a towel around his waist, that's the clothing of a servant. And he does the job that's reserved for the lowest servant in the household, cleansing feet. And the whole time he's saying, this is what it looks like to be God. Stooping to your feet to cleanse you. What is ultimate reality? That will completely condition what you think thriving is. If a plant thrives in sunshine, put it in sunshine. If a plant thrives in shade, put it in shade. If you have come from this kind of God, how will you thrive? You will receive his love, and you will pass it on. That is going with the grain of ultimate reality. But there he is, taking off his robe, putting on the clothing of a servant. He stoops to his disciples' feet, and he starts washing them. Verse 5, he poured water into a basin, began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. The details are significant because John was there. He remembers the time when the heir of the cosmos, the Son of the Father, stooped to his feet and cleansed him. He remembers when the Son of God got hold of him, put his hands on his feet and washed them. He remembers that. And so he puts these little details in. But there are some details that aren't here. Like, do you have questions about this? About, like, how did Jesus do this? Like, so he had the bucket of water, and there are his disciples. Like, did he get down on his knees, and did he wash one person's feet, and then did he stand up with the bucket, and then put the bucket down, and then kneel to his next disciple's feet? Is that what he did? Or did he kind of wash one disciple's feet, and then do that one, and then do that one, right? It's ridiculous when I do it. How amazing to think God does this. How astonishing to think God is the sort of God who would stoop to do the job of the lowest servant. Doesn't care how it looks. And within hours he would be on a cross, stooping so much further down, not caring how it looks. Here is the God who stoops and serves and suffers and cleanses, just to love you, just to get hold of you. What would your reaction be as Jesus moves around the room? How would you feel? I asked my daughter that earlier this morning. I said, how would you feel if Jesus. And then I sort of did the thing. I said, stooped down to your feet and started cleansing your feet. She gave one word answer. Cringe. Yeah. Total cringe, right? Because wouldn't your skin crawl? Here comes Jesus, and my feet are not looking their best, right? I remember I was in India about 20 years ago, and I found myself at a palace, the palace of the Nawab of Paturdi, okay? Don't ask me how I got there, it's a long story, but the first thing I was offered when I came to the palace, the Nawab said, "When would you like your pedicure?" And I was thinking, how's never for you? Is never good? Because I don't want anyone poking around my carbuncle monstrosities. Do you? Right? I've been walking around the market all day in sandals. Like, let me wash my own feet. Isn't that what you would think? I'll wash. Thanks, Jesus. I'll wash my own feet. I didn't want a servant to stoop over my feet while I just sat there. But if you can't imagine even a servant washing your feet, imagine if the Nawab himself, like a Nawab is like a Maharaja, like a lord, right? Imagine the Nawab himself took off his royal robe and stooped to my feet. It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that he would do that. And we find it cringe. Because we're like, I don't want somebody to see my worst bits, right? And I don't want somebody else to have to stoop so low. It is cringe, isn't it? Funnily enough, just before we left the house, my daughter said, "Oh, the heel of my shoe is digging in. Daddy, Daddy." So what did I have to do? Stoop down. Sorted out the heel, and off she went. If you don't think you have a problem, then somebody stooping at your feet is just cringe. If you know you've got a problem, then you actually say, "Please, could you, would you?" And Simon Peter does exactly those things. Verse 6, Jesus came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you'll understand." "No," Peter said, "you shall never wash my feet. That's so cringe, Jesus. No." But then Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me. You really need this, Peter." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well," right? When you're told you really need to take a bath, then you will let somebody stoop. Then you will let somebody cleanse you. And Jesus says, we all need to take a bath. We all have an uncleanness to us. And we need a cleansing of the inside. Have you ever wanted to be cleansed on the inside? Wouldn't that be amazing to have a power shower on the inside? Just be stunning, wouldn't it? A friend of mine counseled a man who'd made terrible decisions in his life. They ruined his marriage, ruined his family, ruined his business. This guy said to my friend, "I wish I could take my whole life, bundle it up in a big washing machine, put it on the hottest wash possible until all the grit and the grime is gone. I just wish I could have that." Have you ever wanted that? I wanted that many, many, many times. Because if ultimate reality is love, how have I lived in response to love? Have I gladly received that love and just passed it on in the world? Have I stooped and served and cleansed others? Have I happily humiliated myself in order to lift up others? Have I been like that? I haven't been like that. I have been so unloving and unlovely. Which means, guess what? I'm going against the grain of reality. And I will get splinters. I am going against the grain of reality and living the cursed life. The cursed life is the opposite of the blessed life, isn't it? And the natural state of human beings is not to allow Jesus to cleanse them and then pass that love on to the world, but the natural state of the human heart is to turn ourselves in on ourselves. To say, "I'm all right, mate," and not to serve and stoop and cleanse others. Our natural state is not to have arms wide stretched to the world in love. Our natural state is to have arms that are curved in on ourselves. To simply live for me, and to nurse our uncleanness to ourselves as our world shrinks smaller and smaller and smaller. You know what the cursed life is? The cursed life is not to receive the cleansing love of Jesus. The cursed life is to nurse your uncleanness to yourself and to wrap yourself around yourself evermore and evermore and evermore in the darkness. The Bible says that's what hell is. Whatever hell is, it's that. It's the opposite of the blessed life. It's the opposite of the life of love. Turning yourself in on yourself. But wonderfully, Peter finds a way out of that. He allows Jesus to get hold of him. He allows Jesus to do this symbolic cleansing. Because the whole thing is a symbol. You notice that it's all symbolic? Verse 10, Jesus answered, those who've had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. That was why he said not every one was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. Do you? Do you understand what he's done? Do you see the whole thing as a parable? Do you see the whole thing as a picture of everything that Jesus has wanted to do, right? He was there in the beginning at the place of honor, wearing his robe, right? And what does he do? He leaves the place of honor. He takes off the robe, the clothing of a king, and he puts on the towel, the clothing of a servant. Do you see how it's a parable? Jesus was there in the beginning at the place of honor, right? Loved by his Father, filled with the Spirit, but he left the place of honor to stoop down to planet Earth, right? To take on the form of a servant. And to keep serving and stooping, and he stoops all the way so that the following day to this, he'll stoop all the way to the cross, won't he? All the way down in order to cleanse us. In the New Testament book of 1 John chapter 1 verse 7, it says that the blood of Jesus purifies us from all sin. You know, Jesus just gets a few of his friends wet on the Thursday night. On the Friday, his death cleanses the world. The blood of Jesus purifies from all sin. You know that power shower on the inside? You know that offer of taking your whole life, putting it in a washing machine until all the grit and the grime is gone? That's why Jesus came. That's why he died on that cross. He died to take your place. To stand in the cursed place. To stand in the place of judgment. To stand in the place where all the curses rain down on his head. So that all the blessings can flow to you. Do you understand what I've done for you? That's what Jesus asks. Do you understand what Jesus has done for you? It's not really what you do for Jesus, is it? It's what Jesus has done for you. That's the heart of the Christian message, not what you do for Jesus, what Jesus has done for you. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. Don't you love the way that verse ends? He says, now I've stooped to cleanse you. He doesn't say, now you cleanse me. He doesn't say, I've washed you, you should wash me. He doesn't say tit for tat, does he? He doesn't say, I've scrubbed your back, you can scrub my back. He says, pass it on. Isn't that beautiful? It's a great quote from church history. Heaven does not need your good deeds. Your neighbour does. These are words I live by. Heaven doesn't need my good deeds. Jesus doesn't need my good deeds, right? My neighbour absolutely needs my good deeds. Could you turn that off? Yeah, thank you. Heaven does not need your good deeds, but your neighbour does. There is a flow of love that comes from the Father. Maybe turn the volume down, and then, yeah. There is a flow of love. The Father's Son comes filled with the Spirit. He stoops to you to cleanse you and to lift you on your feet. And he says, verse 17, now that you know these things, you're blessed if you do them. You thrive if you do them. You're happy if you do them. What is the blessed life? What is the happy life? How do you thrive? The Bible says it's really simple. figure out what ultimate reality is. It's not nothing. It's not chaos. And it's not simply power. It's love. And you thrive when you receive that love and you pass it on in the world. That'll do for now. And I'll hand back and we'll have some time for questions in just a second. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Glenn. Before we jump into some Q&A, there's a QR code that's going to come up on the screen for our response cards. I would really love if everyone here could fill out this form. Leave any comment you want. We'd really love everyone to leave a comment. You can leave it anonymous as well. But if you would also like to learn more and get more involved with the EU and find out about the other things we do, there's an opportunity for you to do that there as well. So we'll give you a minute just to fill that out now.
Thanks everyone for filling out that form. We've got a few minutes now available for question time. And so if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and Henry's going to come around with the mic.
Hi, Glenn.
Hello.
What would you say to people who think that Jesus is kind of too convenient of an answer to, the meaninglessness of everything?
Is Jesus too convenient of an answer to the meaninglessness of things? I would say if my answer was, there is some kind of higher power, submit, I would think that would be quite a simplistic kind of answer. I think actually to say that the meaning of the universe is Jesus is to actually say something that's pretty nuanced and complex, because Jesus is incredibly nuanced and incredibly complex. In the beginning was the Word, says this book, and the Word is a title for Jesus. It's the Greek word logos, and the Greeks had this understanding that the whole universe runs according to the logos, according to the logic of reality. And if I was just saying, there is an abstract law out there that the universe runs according to, and here are 17 rules for life, and just do that, I would say that would be convenient in one sense. That would be simplistic. But when you say, no, personal reality is ultimate reality, at that stage, I'm not in charge anymore, because if there are laws, I can be in charge of how I obey those laws, and it's all on me. It's on my shoulders, and if I'm a good, obedient kind of servant, then I can get good at obeying those laws. If it's a person that I'm called into relationship with, if I'm to meet Jesus, that's a very complex thing. Every relationship is infinitely complex, because persons are infinitely complex. So I would say what is on offer with meeting Jesus is something that is nuanced, that is personal, that calls forth from us something a bit like, a significant relationship. My relationship with my wife, I could read a manual about how to get married or how to stay married, but what I really need to do is get to know Emma. And getting to know Emma is a complicated business. And I discover more complexities to her as I go on. And I think because there's a personal relationship with an infinitely interesting person, I would say that putting Jesus at the center of your meaning of life is actually to make things very nuanced and very complex and interesting.
Thanks, Glenn. To some people, the suffering and death experienced by many Christians is not thriving. What would you say to this?
The suffering and death experienced by many Christians is not thriving. I guess I would refer the person to last week's talk. So on Thursday, I gave a talk on John chapter 11. And so just 2 chapters before this, you have Lazarus and he's sick. And his sisters send word to Jesus, and they say, the one you love is sick. And then, I think it's verse 5, it says, Lazarus loves Martha, loves Mary, the 2 sisters, and loves Lazarus. And he delays, and he allows Lazarus actually to die. He goes from sickness actually to death. He allows suffering, and he allows death in a quite extraordinary way. And then, as I said last week, he shows up to the funeral late, and then he starts crying, and he cries more than everybody else, so that everybody else is saying, oh gosh, he's a blubbering wreck, what do we do? And then with his tear-stained face, he then says, Lazarus, come out of the tomb, and raises him up. And actually, that is the pattern of what thriving looks like in the Bible. It actually looks like going down much further into a dark valley of suffering and death than you are ever prepared to go. Because Jesus is the resurrection that brings you up out of death. He doesn't just repair you from sickness. He actually allows things to go down to death and then raises them up. Which means that actually following Jesus is not going to be nice, pleasant, easy, sweet. It's going to be with Jesus, stooping with Jesus, right? The way he stoops to his disciples. And it means going lower than you thought you were prepared to go, and lower than you ever thought love would allow you to go. And yet, if the pattern is Jesus' pattern, death and then resurrection, then to follow Jesus is to be assured that there will be suffering and death in this world, but to also be assured that there will be the redemption of that suffering and death in this world. And since all of us will suffer, and all of us will die, I think what Christians say is, I would much rather put my hand into the hand of Jesus, who knows the way through those things. And so let me suffer and let me die with Jesus. Because really there's no other way through this life. We all must walk through the valley of the shadow. But what an amazing thing to walk through with a shepherd who knows the way.
Thank you. Glenn, do you think there's a limit to thriving, since God's love is limitless?
Yeah. Is there a limit to thriving? I'm a finite person, and I wish I could enjoy things as much as my children enjoy things, because when they're happy, they are so happy. And I max out at like 70% happiness nowadays. It'll happen to you too. You guys are in the prime of your lives. This is as happy as it ever gets, just so you know. Soon you'll be over the hill like me, and your capacity for happiness and thriving does diminish and does decrease, and it goes to show that we are bodily creatures and we can only take so much. That's why I'm very reassured by the promise of eternal life with a new body, a renewed body, in a renewed heaven and earth, where actually my capacity for receiving happiness is as much as God's capacity for giving it. And so, I think you're right that we ought to sort of temper our expectations for what thriving looks like. It might not look like blissful, plastered grin on you the entire time, but in the same way that your mango plant kind of thrives in that sunlight, I think we can get a sense of, even in this life, I'm going with the grain of reality, and there is a contentment that runs deep in me. Even though there's suffering, even though there's trial, even though there's death, it doesn't mean a shallow happiness. And it also means that it's an expectant joy, that actually I'm looking forward to being as happy as I can possibly be, not now, but actually when Jesus returns.
Thanks so much, Glenn, and would everyone please join me in thanking Glenn? And thank you all for coming today. For those of you who are exploring more about Jesus, can I encourage you to keep considering the claims of Christ? And the best way to do that is to read it for yourself in the Bible. And so if you don't have one already, pick up a copy of the Bible, and with the help of a Christian friend or a Bible study group, I really encourage you to read it. So chat to the friend who invited you along, or anyone in a yellow or black Meet Jesus t-shirt, and we'd love to help you. We've now got lunch, so that's going to be happening on the lawns. It's not going to be on the square, so it is going to be in the square in front of the physics lawns, and so there'll be ushers pointing you in that direction. Thank you.